não só do projeto, mas boa parte dos colegas do programa, de uma forma ou outra, fomos suas alunas, seus alunos. Por exemplo, eu tive a honra de ser orientada no doutorado pela Luciana, a Luciana no pós-doutorado, a Flávia trabalhou com a Lúcia na revista Imagens da Unicamp, o Samuel foi aluno, assistiu os cursos. Enfim, há 5 anos atrás, aqui nesse mesmo auditório, a Lúcia foi a nossa palestrante convidada numa conferência, na experiência que a gente fez aqui da Socini Regional. E foi nesse evento que as sementes desse projeto surgiram. Lucia Najib is a professor of film and director of the Center of Film Aesthetics and Cultures at the University of Reading. Her research has focused, among other subjects, on polycentric approaches to world cinema, new waves and new cinemas, cinematic realism and intermediality. In and out of Brazil, Lucia is an important reference in many subjects as Brazilian cinema, New German cinema, Japanese nouvelle vague, Herzog, Mitsuguchi, and, of course, theory of cinema. She has an impressive and solid production. 6 single authored books, plus 8 as editor or co-editor, not to mention her numerous book chapters and articles. I just will mention some of her books: World Cinema and the Ethics of Realism, Brazil on Screen, Cinema Novo, New Cinema in Utopia, O Cinema da Retomada, depoimentos de 90 cineastas dos anos 90, Nascido das Cinzas, autor e sujeito nos filmes de Oshima, Werner Herzog, O Cinema como Realidade. And she is the co-editor of Impure Cinema, Intermediate and Intercultural Approaches of Film, Theorizing World Cinema, Realism and the Audiovisual Media, among others. Please join me to welcome Professor Lucia Najib.
Bom dia a todos. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for waking up so early to come and attend this session. It's such a wonderful and great pleasure for me to be here and resuming my contact with people who are very dear to me but live so far apart. The new media networks and email and so on helped to plug in some of the gaps, but still the physical presence, and for me physicality, realism is so key. So the fact that I can really hug these people and kiss them is really an incredible emotion. I think that the work that the people in São Carlos are doing is extremely important, and the fact that they have been central to Socini, that they've now been fighting to create a more wide-ranging postgraduate program. They already have a very, very successful MA, but they are going to move on and have a PhD program here very soon, I'm sure. It's all the proof of their efforts and their dedication and their intellectual strength. I have to thank Susanna, my dear former PhD student. I learned so much from her about music and cinema, so she's obviously one inspiration for me to think about intermediality. Luciana, who taught me so much about early Brazilian cinema, again an area I knew nothing about and I'm still learning from her. Flavia, who has a fantastic book on early cinema, and again somebody that I'm constantly learning from. Samuel is going to be my dear research partner here. You're going to be doing, hopefully, this beautiful film called Passagens. And without him, that would not be possible. And also thanks to my dear Reading colleagues, but they hear my thanks every day at Reading, so I'll be short on that front. And I've said some words yesterday already about them. But anyway, it's an immense pleasure being here, and thank you all for organizing this wonderful conference. Okay, time to get started with serious talk. Let me see. I like this quote very much by Thomas Elsasser and Maite Hagner. The cinema seems poised to leave behind its function as a medium for the representation of reality in order to become a life form, and thus a reality in its own right. You will see very soon why I chose these quotes to represent passages. The relationship between cinema and the real is probably the most central and complex issue in film studies. As far as our intermediate research project is concerned, I believe it to be key. What is there in the prefix inter, forming the word intermediate, that interests us so much? Why do we devote so much time and money to thinking and talking about it? Can the interface between media, that is, the passage from one medium to another, the information exchange between two or more different media, have any value in itself? Surely this phenomenon has to bear consequences to our lives and to society in general in order to be worth studying. In an attempt to address this question, my focus today will be on those works which embrace cinema's intermediate nature with a political intent and to political ends. In what follows, I shall test the extent to which these works endeavor to have transformative effects on the reality around them. I am certainly not the first to sense the gravitas of the real in the state of in-betweenness that characterizes cinema from its inception. Agnes Berto, for example, warns us that the medium is not just a vehicle for meaning, but physical content itself. She says, and you can see the quotes there, theories of medium have called attention to the way in which it is never directly the meaning or the pure message that we perceive in a communication, but the material mediality of the signification which unavoidably shapes our construction of meaning. Richard Rushton, in turn, defends the idea that films are not simply representation of reality or a deficient and secondary mode of reality. Instead, they are reality themselves, or in his words, filmic reality, given that everything we see and hear in a film instantly becomes part of our lived experience. Outside the intermediate sphere, critics such as Lavoj Žižek have identified the kernel of the real, this is his expression, in the virtual form of film, a subject dear, for example, to semioticians and linguists such as Roman Jakobson, who highlights as one of cinema's main properties the ability to combine sign and referent. He says, and this is easier for you to follow, is there a contradiction between these two theses? Film operates by the object. Film operates by the sign. The contradiction between these two theses had already been discussed by St. Augustine. This brilliant 5th century thinker, who subtly distinguished the thing, res, from the sign, signum, shows that alongside the signs, whose essential function is to signify something, there are things that we can utilize with the function of sign. It is precisely this optical and acoustic thing changed into sign that constitutes the specific matter of cinema. So my proposal in this talk will be to investigate the material life that pulsates in the intersection between the film medium and real life. My focus will fall onto the passage, the intersection, the fleeting moment where both film and life merge before becoming themselves again. This is the moment in which I wish to claim they become artistic and political. The analysis of some representative works by Beto Branchi, Cláudia Assis, Paulo Caldas, and Marcelo Luna will follow in order to buttress my arguments that transitionality between artistic media, real life, social classes, and not least between themselves. I would like to start by showing a clip of an utterly accomplished example of the political circuit that connects film, the other arts, and life in recent Brazilian cinema. I'm referring to the film Delicate Crime, Crime Delicado, by Beto Branch, 2005. I have devoted a full chapter to this film in my book, World Cinema and the Ethics of Realism, but there is still more to say about it. I never end finding things and discovering gems inside this film. The film's heightened level of intermediality begins with it being the screen adaptation of Sérgio Santana's homonymous novella, going on to change consecutively into theater and painting without recognizing frontiers between any of these different art forms. One of the film's narrative strands focuses on Inês, a young woman who has a disability both in the film and in real life. She doesn't have a leg. She models for a painter, José Torres Campana, played by Mexican diplomat Felipe Ehrenberg, who is also a painter in real life. At a certain point, Inês is shown posing for the film's ski painting called Pas de Deux. As you can see in these pictures, painter and model are naked and engaged in different embraces, during which he draws the sketches which are subsequently transferred to the canvas. Both processes, the drawing of the sketches and the actual painting, are shot while in progress. That is, Ehrenberg produced this painting during the actual shooting of the film. Thus, what we see in this scene is the actors leaping out of representation and into a presentational regime in which the production of an artwork is concomitant with its reproduction. I'm now going to show a clip of this film, and it is 10 minutes long, but it's absolutely necessary that I show it from beginning to end. When I show this clip, I would ask the help of dear helpers here to turn down the lights. Yeah. Dá para baixar essa aqui? Ligar tudo.
mas não vai sair.
Tu disse que ia lembrar.
Eu disse, vamos ter que inventar de novo. Agora sim. Sim, foi isso. Ao menos foi algo parecido. Encontramos, viu? Encontramos o que queríamos. Está totalmente molhado.
Minha mão tá voltando agora. Ah, gostei.
Um pouco mais para trás. Momento. Isso não vai te molestar.
Não.
Ok. Coloca a mão aqui. Não, aí se perde. Vamos fazer um pouco mais malicioso. Me pega. Se apoia. Isso. 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 Ok. Ah, isso está ótimo. Já está legal. Então, está aí esta curva que vem aqui assim, que é muito boa. Esta parte que vou trabalhar mais.
Okay, as you have seen in this very long sequence, the most startling aspect of it is in that painting of this piece called Pas de Deux, is that a real painter and a real model agreed to create an artwork in real life whilst simultaneously playing fictional characters in a film. The fact that this involved full nudity and physical intimacy between both, and that to that end, the model, who is disabled in real life, had to remove her prosthetic leg before the camera, indicates the transformative effects the film necessarily had on the actors' real lives. The resulting picture has in its center, as you have seen, an erect penis placed next to a dilated vulva, implying that if the painting was real, so was the sexual arousal between painter and model. Suggestively, the male organ appears as a substitute of the missing leg, filling in the representational gap that allows for art and sex to become reality. This example is central to my line of inquiry, first of all because of its passages from life to art and vice versa, starting with a physical encounter between two real characters that turns into drawing, then into painting, and then back to real life, causing the model to be overcome with emotion when observing the result on the canvas. But it also raises questions around film's dubious status as art, despite or even because it is all about the making of an artwork as it happens. Indeed, the everlasting dispute around cinema's artistic claims is centered precisely on the fact that, as a recording medium, it entertains an unmediated relationship with objective reality, as opposed to the other mimetic or representational arts, whose association with the real filters through the artist's creative mind and hand. Krakauer's much contested realist theory is incisive in this respect when he states, and you can see the quote there, due to its fixed meaning, the concept of art does not and cannot cover truly cinematic films. Films, that is, which incorporate aspects of physical reality with a view to making us experience them. And yet, it is they, not the films reminiscent of traditional artworks, which are valid aesthetically. If film is an art at all, it certainly should not be confused with the established arts. Before Krakauer, Arnheim had already embraced a similar line of approach by saying, film resembles painting, music, literature, and the dance. In this respect, it is a medium that may, but need not, be used to produce artistic results. More recently, Alain Badiou has refined these thoughts in the following terms. It is effectively, I think this is Arnheim, and this is Badiou. It is effectively impossible to think cinema outside of something like a general space in which we could grasp its connection to the other arts. Cinema is the seventh art in a very particular sense. It does not add itself to the other six while remaining on the same level as them. Rather, it implies them. Cinema is the plus one of the arts. It operates on the other arts using them as its starting point in a movement that subtracts them from themselves. My own view resonates with and aspires to add to Badiou's understanding by attempting to explain the ways in which real life, rather than undermining, politicizes film's artistic endeavor. Reflecting on the politics of intermediality, Schroeter reminds us that since the 1960s, when the term first started to be used, intermediate art forms have aspired to abolish the schism between art and life. Along the same lines, I shall argue that this real-life politics constitutes the very artistic arena where the films I am focusing on operate. By physically engaging crew and cast in the production of artworks within the film, be it painting, theater, literature, or any other art forms, and by committing these works to political causes, they subordinate intermediality to social change. But before progressing further on the analysis of other bits of films that I'm going to be showing you, a disclaimer is in order as refers to genre. In fact, all the films I have chosen to analyze here, though not exactly popular, can be described as conventional feature-length fiction films intended for commercial distribution and exhibition at traditional outlets. The wisdom of my choice could be questioned in that the intersection between real life and film would seem much more evident in radical ventures such as expanded cinema experiments involving live performance, or else works that provide comprehensive spectatorial immersion, such as virtual reality films. In order to justify my choice, I will briefly summarize a taxonomy I have developed in order to address the possible meanings of cinematic realism. As you can see here, I start with realism derived from modes of production. Here, I would include physical engagement on the part of crew and cast with the pro-filmic event, identity between casts and their roles, real location shooting, emphasis on the index. The second mode would be realism derived from modes of address. 2D flat screen films aiming at eliciting narrative realism, films eliciting reality effect by means of graphic representation, and the opposite of these two, films that unveil the reality of the medium. The third mode would be realism derived from modes of exhibition, films that include live performances such as in expanded cinema experiments. And the last category would be realism derived from modes of reception, the reality effect as obtained through immersive spectatorship employing 3D and IMAX environments and 4D virtual reality devices. These are, by the way, not restricted to new technology. As we saw in Ian Christie's talk yesterday, panoramas were already trying to elicit that kind of immersive spectatorship. Most theories on cinematic realism are concerned with the last category, that is, with realism at reception point. It is indeed a fact that, regardless of their recording processes, audiovisual media can affect spectators through the so-called reality effect by means of graphic representations able to cause physical and emotional impact, even when there is no representational realism at play. For example, when the physical impact on the spectator derives from animation or computer-generated images and sounds. Traditional 2D screenings of action films are perfectly capable of producing reality effects, but particular techniques such as 3D projections, IMAX, and the more recent 4D virtual reality devices have been specifically designed to enhance them. Whatever the case, however, reality effects are always more effects than reality, given the interdiction of actual spectator or spectatorial participation. Even reality, the virtual reality devices, though allowing the spectator to move their heads freely and choose what to look within a 360 degree spectrum, are nonetheless unable to provide any kind of actual interaction. You can't interact with the film, although it seems that you are in the actual environment. As Christian Metz was the first to note, there is an indelible fracture between seeing and being seen in films, in any of these films I just mentioned to you, due to the temporal gap that separates the moment of filming from that of viewing. And this is why, for Metz, the spectator's position at any film screening is necessarily scopophilic. Reality effects are, moreover, subordinate to the varying subjective susceptibilities, hence impossible to measure by universal standards. As a rule, however, as technology evolves and tricks are cracked, reality effects tend to wane with time and lose their battle against the human brain that opposes a natural resistance to illusionism. A historical example is that of the audience members who purportedly fainted or ran away when first exposed to Lumiere's Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat in 1895, a film which has become perfectly innocuous to current-day spectators. As Oliver Grau aptly explains, when a new medium of illusion is introduced, it opens a gap between the power of the image's effect and conscious reflected distancing in the observer. This gap narrows again with increasing exposure, and there is a reversion to conscious appraisal. Habituation chips away at the illusion, and soon it no longer has the power to captivate. It becomes stale, and the audience are hardened to its attempts at illusion. At this stage, the observers are receptive to content and artistic media competence, until finally a new medium with even greater appeal to the senses and greater suggestive power comes along and casts a spell of illusion over the audience again. So the way we let ourselves be deluded by what film is showing us is something that decreases with habit. So you get used to that, and then you don't feel the power of illusion anymore. So that's what he's explaining, and certainly this is going to happen to VR effects and 360 degrees experiences. As for modes of exhibition, there is an undeniable political intent in the realistic endeavor of films involving live performance. Expanded cinema experiments are the ultimate expression of this category, insofar as they preserve the auratic Einmaligkeit, or uniqueness, held by Benjamin as the very definition of an artwork. However, for the same reason, they also have to relent on the recording and replicating properties of the film medium, aimed at reaching the masses, the public, without which, as Bazin claimed, there is no cinema, as well as to the possibility of preserving their achievements to posterity. Film studies tools alone are therefore insufficient to address such phenomena. As for modes of address, realism must forcibly be associated with the impression of reality elicited by what Baudry famously defined as the basic cinematographic apparatus, l'appareil de base, including the projector, the flat screen, and the dark collective auditorium. Despite film's vertiginous technological development since its invention and the multiplication of its uses, supports and platforms, the basic cinematographic apparatus, as provided by the cinema auditorium, has demonstrated extraordinary resilience, remaining for over a century the standard outlet for filmic experience. This endurance, I believe, is due to the comfort zone it affords the spectator between the reality effect and the natural brain resistance to total illusionism. It is, moreover, a space capable of accommodating a range of cinematic genres and styles, from classical narrative cinema of closure, devoted to eliciting an impression of reality, to mixed genre productions endowed with disruptive devices that draw attention to the reality of the medium, such as the films I am interested in here, and I think Delicate Crime is a prime example of this. Moreover, as Arnheim had already noted, human 3D perception of reality is itself an illusion, given that the human retina is as flat as the traditional cinema screen. The three-dimensional impression we have of objective realities is only produced thanks to our stereoscopic vision that promotes the fusion of two slightly different images resulting from the distance between our eyes. All this to say that my chosen case studies sit entirely within the first category of modes of production, relying heavily on the physical engagement on the part of crew and cast with the pro-filmic event, the near identity between the cast and their roles, real location shooting, and film's inherent indexical properties. So you have seen all these qualities in the extract I have just shown. In these films, the illusionistic fictional thread interweaves with documentary footage and crew and cast's direct interference into the historical world, aimed not only at highlighting the reality of the medium, but also at producing as well as reproducing social reality. Needless to say, none of the modes above exist per se, a film relying on physical engagement at production point being only thus conceived for the specific reality effect it is expected to have on the spectator, of course. This is incidentally confirmed by the extract of Delicate Crime I have just shown, in which the actor's physical engagement in the live production of an artwork leads to the actress's emotional reaction when, within the film, she becomes a spectator of the resulting painting. There is no doubt that her sobs at that point are real. Modes of production are, however, I wish to argue, the only objective way of proofing and proving a film's intention, given the countless variables inflecting the ways in which films are subjectively perceived by each individual. So that's why I chose modes of production, because there you have the proof and the evidence of how the film was made. Whereas to analyze the degree of realism at reception point, you're always subjected to the different sensibilities of each individual spectator. Okay, now I'm going to move to some more intermediate passages. After I have clarified what I mean by realism as mode of production. In his posthumous magnum opus, Das Passagenwerk, in English, the Arcades Project, Walter Benjamin refers to old definitions of the Parisian passages, or arcades, as a city, a world in miniature. In its connective and agglutinatory role, the Parisian passages are at once conducive and final, roads to somewhere else and destination for commerce, socialization, and habitation. Conflating the ephemeral and the permanent, passages were for Benjamin the site of utopia, as he beautifully describes in this passage here. In the dream in which each epoch entertains images of its successor, the latter appears wedded to elements of primal history, Urgeschichte, that is, to elements of a classless society. And the experience of such a society as stood in the unconscious of the collective, engendered through interpenetration with what is now the utopia that has left its trace in 1,000 configurations of life, from enduring edifices to passing fashions. Along the same lines, I would like to define my chosen case studies by their utopian passages. They are the sudden condensation of the real of the in-betweenness as defined by Peto, but also the point of production of connections between fiction and the document, as well as between filmmakers united through the hope of a classless society. Again here, Delicate Crime gives me the opportunity to elaborate on an encounter, this time between two opposing regions of Brazil, São Paulo and Pernambuco, which are prominently represented within the Intermedia project. I have two colleagues from Pernambuco, and I am from São Paulo, and we are working together and creating passages. Another of the film's intermediate aspects relates to theater. I'm talking still about Delicate Crime. And in the same way that we see painting in the making, the theater plays shown in the film are extracts of real spectacles running in the city of São Paulo when the film was made. These in turn interweave with the story of protagonist Antônio Martins, a theater critic played by Marco Riga. Fictional though this character is, he's also constantly interacting with real-life characters, not least the Pernambucan film director Cláudio Assis, the one at the top, who makes a cameo appearance as a rowdy, jealous lover in a bar, in a short theatrical sketch for the sole enjoyment of Antônio Martins. Assis's appearance in Paulistan Branch's film is not accidental and indicates that both directors had been conversing through their films, not least, as I hope to demonstrate, by creating intermediate passages. Both Branch and Assis had started in the film business in the dark era of the late 1980s and early 1990s in Brazil, when a stagnant film industry led to massive migration of filmmakers to the advertisement branch. Several of them devoted themselves to commercial music videos, working together with a blooming generation of popular musicians at the time, including Chico Science and Fred 04 in Pernambuco, O Rapa in Rio, and Os Titãs and Sabotage in São Paulo. It is both tragic and a testament to the violent society they were addressing that some of these musicians lost their lives, Sabotage and Chico Science among them, or were gravely injured, like Marcelo Yuca of O Rapa, while at the height of their productivity. Branch and Assis directly applied the skills acquired through music video making to the social critique developed later in their feature-length films. To illustrate this point, I will now show extracts from two concomitant films of 2002, made respectively by Beto Branch, The Trespasser, O Invasor, and Cláudio Assis, Mango Yellow or Amarelo Manga. These, in my view, ideally reflect the director's intermediate and realist drive, first by turning film into music, second by establishing a link between characters, classes, and social environments, and lastly, by nationalizing and internationalizing regional issues with the help of rap and pop music. In The Trespasser, the title role of hitman Anísio is played by Paulo Miklos. You are going to be seeing him in a minute, a musician and a member of the band Os Titãs, for whom Branch made several music videos. Anísio is hired by a property developer to kill one of his partners, Estevão. As well as exceeding his commission by killing both Estevão and his wife, Anísio manages to penetrate the property developer's luxurious home and seduce his daughter, Marina. Anísio and Marina then embark on a trip into São Paulo's poor periphery, edited in the pace of a rap by Sabotage, who is also a character in the film. The result is a sweeping flannery that collects documentary snapshots put together at the pace of Sabotage's rap song, Na Zona Sul, about the miserable southern zone of São Paulo and its difficult daily life. This is a quote from the rap. At this point, thanks to the jump cuts, the favela appears as a natural continuation of the noble quarters of the city. The breaking of geographic boundaries caused by the brusque cuts results in striking and entirely recognizable evidence of the state of aesthetic communion among Brazilian urban social classes, although, of course, they still remain economically apart. The way that real life interweaves with fiction here, through a typically intermediate procedure, combining film and music, was shockingly enhanced by the fact that Sabotage, the great revelation in the cast of The Trespasser, was murdered soon after the opening of the film as a result of an ongoing gang war. I'm now going to show this clip. And again, if possible, great to have the lights down.
É pra ver a vida.
Tô a fim de pintar as paredes aí de azul.
Você é uma menina que tem escolha, cara. Azul, um azul royal. Já reparou as nuvens? Elas são azuis. Elas se movem de canto para canto, de espaço para espaço. Vão levando todas as forças negativas de dentro da casa, levando tudo para as ondas do mar sagrado. Azul, azul da força, de Odin.
Odin?
É, azul de Odin. Odin, príncipe do vento. Aí, ó, tá achando, ó, um rosa também. Um rosa meio acinzelhado, assim, nas portas. Já é um reforço, cara. Ó, tanto as forças do bem quanto as forças do mal, cara. Tranca. É o seguinte, cara. Sabe aqueles dias que você tá, porra, que você tá naquela mal olhado, cara.
Nóia, assim, tipo, noiado.
Aquela urucubaca, você tá me entendendo? Que aí você, porra, você abre a mente, cara. Olha pra cima.
Vou botar um som.
Ó.
Não vou ligar o som, não. Vamos sair.
Bora.
Na Zona Sul, cotidiano difícil. Mantenho o proceder, quem não conter tá fudido. É Zona Sul, maluco, cotidiano difícil. Mantenho o proceder, quem não conter tá fudido. Eu insisto, persisto, não mando recado. Eu tenho algo a dizer, não vou ficar calado. Fatos tumultuados, nunca me convenceu. Mas vale a vida, bem-vindo às vilas do meu bairro. Deus corre trap, tem 15 no crente, chantagem. Gambezinho faz acerto, depois mata na crocodilagem. Absurdo, tão miludo no subúrbio. Dinheiro sujo, constantemente nos traz no futuro. Nossos amigos e aliados pensando em ganhar. Não adianta passar pano, o pano rasga. Mundo cão, decepção, constrói e transforma. Pivetada da quebrada num transporte pra droga. Zona Sul, conheço o povo todo inibido. Tanta promessa, enrolação, então acaba nisso. De Vila Olímpia, Rocinha, Ponte, Fundão. Olha lá, se liga aí, lá está, é o canão. Piolho, uma conexão, BQ Negachil. Parque Independência representa bicho. Nem um pio, só no sapatinho, isso eu dou valor. Sem da goela que castou, mano, pela nota, pela morte um aposento. Melhor que o veneno, viver livre no extremo. Andar de contra o vento, Jardim Edite. Casa do Norte, o papo é sério. Ciclone, o super-homem vive no inferno. Aqui estou, demorou, zona show. Domingão à tarde, o sol tá forte. Aí ladrão, é raridade. Fui pro vai-vai, troquei o louco, o neném, o Sagate. E o Eduardo, muito louco no Passat. São Paulo, Pedroso, toca muita paz. Ouvintes nacionais.
Now, I would like you to compare this sequence with another one from Mango Yellow, Amarelo Manga, by Cláudia Assis. Here, the film's ability to dissect and scrutinize the entrails of society is again demonstrated in music video style at the pace of the song Dollywood by Lúcio Maia and Jorge do Peixe, former members of the band Nação Zumbi, led by the legendary founder of the Mangue Beach movement, Chico Science, tragically deceased in 1997. Okay, another clip.
Olha, esse é um problema antigo que a gente já está se acostumado. Agora as autoridades competentes não tomam as devidas providências.
I would have some comments to make about the color and the way that yellow is the thread of repulsive dirt and expensive life that runs across the entire clip and all the. I have some images to show here. You see the blue arrow showing. This comes from the inspiration of this color and the props that are present in each single shot of this clip. They come from poetry, and this is actually an extract from a writer, Renato Carneiro de Campos. And what he says is here, oh no, it's not here. So I'll briefly read it. Yellow is the color of the tables, the benches, the stools, the fish knife handles, the hoe and the sickle, the bull cart, of the yokes, of the old hats, of the dried meat. Yellow of the diseases, of the children's runny eyes, of the purulent wounds, of the spit, of the worms, of hepatitis, of diarrheas, of the rotten teeth. Interior time yellow, old, washed out, sick. It starts yellow as normal objects, and it just goes into the dirty underbelly of society. And I think this sequence is what it does, connecting these different layers of society. So in both sequences, music, real life, and social critique combine in an inextricable manner at a moment in which film avers itself as passage, conduit, material in-betweeners, and political intermediality. But to complete my analysis, I will now turn to one of the most eloquent intermedial encounters of political intent in Brazilian cinema, this time explicitly uniting São Paulo and Pernambuco in a perfect symmetry to my previous example of the encounter between Pernambucan Cláudio Assis and Paulistan Beto Brandt. It is the documentary film The Little Prince's Rap Against the Wicked Souls, o rap do Pequeno Príncipe contra as Almas Cebosas, made in 2000 by Paulo Caldas and Marcelo Luna, just a couple of years before The Trespasser and Mango Yellow. The film focuses on a vigilante or justiceiro called Elinho, Hélio José Muniz, currently in jail for his numerous killings, as well as on a character in all antipodal to him, Alexandre Garnizé, the drummer of hip-hop and band Faces do Subúrbio, who is devoted to educational and charitable work. Both characters hail from Camaragibe, a dormitory town in the periphery of Recife, where crime and impunity thrive, but where music offers, as suggested by an UFSCar critic, Felipe Brito Gama, the utopia of social change. The scene in question brings together members of Pernambuco's Faces do Subúrbio and São Paulo's Racionais MCs, two famous bands at the time. The extract starts with Mano Brown and Ice Blue from Racionais MCs enjoying a typical northeastern meal of jerked beef and boiled manioc on a roof terrace in Camaragibe. Whilst chatting about the record levels of criminality in São Paulo's southern zone, so they're talking about the same zone in São Paulo, but they are now in Recife, the two look down onto the sprawling favela landscape and identify each of its sections with favela from that area of São Paulo. So São Paulo overlaps with Recife. This preludes one of the most symbolic passages ever shot in Brazilian cinema, I think, consisting of an aerial long take of around 2 minutes over the never-ending favelas around Recife, to the sound of rap Salve, composed by the two characters, whose lyrics, uttered from the perspective of someone behind bars, salutes the populations from favelas from São Paulo, Rio, and Belo Horizonte. As the names of these communities are called out, in an interminable list, space-time realism enabled by the long take offers indexical evidence to the connection of all Brazilian regions through the underbelly of poverty. I'm going to show this last clip now and then wrap up my talk.
De que país que é? É difícil, aqui é difícil. A briga aqui é grande, mano. Nós estamos brigando com os caras aí que é fudido, os caras são inteligentes. Nós estamos brigando com nós mesmo. Ah, também, mano, também. Mas porque os caras estão fazendo essa guerra, mano. Os caras, eles estão colocando esse ódio aí, essa raiva dentro da gente, tá, mano? Eles que fazem essa situação. Eles estão em cima, aprendendo camarote, mano. Pra eles tá bom, eles estão comendo carne todo dia, mano. É porque os caras falaram que terceiro ano consecutivo que é o lugar mais violento do mundo, né? Número de homicídio, né? Lá. Jardim Ângela, Parque Santo Antônio, Capão Redondo, é isso aí. É tudo zona sul, né? Tudo um do lado do outro. Que nem aqui, ó. Aqui é o Ângela, aí vem daquela Casa Branca ali é o Capão. Lá em cima naquela azul ali já é o São Luís. Lá nas árvores, lá em cima é o Parque Santo Antônio. Isso assim, de novo. É, e aqui também, né? Alto Brasil, Alto Pascoal, Santa Terezinha, tudo colado, tudo dá isso aí. Seu Aladeira São
Vou mandar um salve pra comunidade do outro lado dos muros. As grades nunca vão prender nosso pensamento, mano. Se liga aí, Jardim Evana, Parque do Engenho, Gerivá, Jardim Rosana, Pirajussara, Santa Teresa,
Vaz de Lima, Parque Santo Antônio, Capelinha, Promorá, Vila Calu, Branca Flor, Paranapanema e Aracati.
Novo Oriente, Parque Arariba, Jardim Igá, Parque P, pessoal da Sabim, Jardim Marcelo, Cidade Ademar, Jardim São Carlos, Jardim Primavera, Santa Amélia, Jardim Santa Terezinha, Jardim Miriam, Vila Santa Catarina, aí Vietnã,
Cocaia, Cipó, Colônia, Campanária em Diadema, Calux em São Bernardo, Vila Industrial em Santo André,
Bairro das Pimentas, Brasilândia, Jardim Japão, Jardim Hebron, Coab 1, Coab 2, São Mateus, Itaim, Cidade Tiradentes, Barueri, Coab de Taipas,
Mangueira, Borel, Cidade de Deus. E aí, DF, Expansão, P-Norte, P-Sul. E aí, pessoal do Sul, Restinga. E aí, Quebrada, Zona Noroeste, Santos, Rádio Favela, BH. E pra todos os aliados espalhados pelas favelas do Brasil, firma!
Todos os DJs, todos os MCs que fazem do rap a trilha sonora do gueto. E pros filha da puta que quer jogar minha cabeça pros povos, aí, tenta a sorte, mano. Eu acredito na palavra de um homem de pele escura, de cabelo crespo, que andava entre mendigos e leprosos, pregando a igualdade. Um homem chamado Jesus, só ele sabe a minha hora. Aí, ladrão, tô saindo fora. Paz.
Tá bom, a gente tem que ir no prédio.
Okay, as Arturo Tre, I think he's there, reminds us, aerial shots of favelas have a long history in Brazilian cinema, harking back to Rio 40 Graus, Rio 40 Degrees, from 1955, and are invariably intended to define the country's national identity through its territories of poverty. The extraordinary event in this particular long take is, however, its intermediality, through which, like in the other examples, music provides the virtual medium of film with a passage to reality. Granted, the ways the lyrics suggest that social change can only be attained through religion. For those of you who didn't understand, what he's saying here is that everything is going to be resolved by a figure of a black man who walked among beggars and lepers, and the name of this man is Jesus. So this solution through religion had already been dismissed as ineffective as far back as 1964 in Glauber Horcher's Black God, White Devil. This, however, does not detract from the documentarian physical truth provided by the interminable name-calling of favelas across Brazil. They are all here. The indexical images of real, continuous favelas, and not least the reality of death, which this and so many favela films in Brazil are all about. Elinho, the main character in this film, it must be noted, was the author of 44 deaths at the time of the film, and his ongoing trial had already sentenced him to 99 years in jail. He had actually passed 44 lives. The verb passar, or to pass, in Portuguese, also meaning to kill or waste in the favela slang, abundantly explored in the favela films made in those days. By passing over to the other side of the prison walls through the conduit of music, the film puts us fleetingly in touch with utopia and its artistic reality. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia, for your stimulating speech and with so many instigating ideas. Well, let's open to some questions.
Just to say that if anybody wants to ask questions in Portuguese, that's fine. We can then clarify in English.
Hello. Hi, Lucia. Thank you so much for your talk. I have quite a few questions, but I'll try and maybe pose two now very briefly, and then see how the debate goes. So thank you so much. In terms of your taxonomy of realism, you have given us modes of production and modes of address in separate categories. And in terms of modes of production, that's what you're concentrating on. I was wondering, in relation to the Trespassers clip that you showed us, that is supposed to be taking place in the south of São Paulo, but in fact it was shot in the north of São Paulo. Does that complicate, if you want to speak about proving your points, and I don't know, if that is really important, the mode of production, if that is crucial to your argument, does it matter that Beto Branches shot that in the north? And in relation to music, in this one, the last one that you showed us, if music is also so crucial, is it important to know that Portishead actually wrote the music to which Mano Brown is singing? So it's actually a sample from a Bristol band. And what does that entail to this clip? And again, in relation to both, do you take into account the outsider's point of view of both directors and their distance? So if you have an aerial shot and you have someone sitting on the passenger seat of a car looking into a reality that they do not belong to. I mean, the character in The Trespasser, the girl, she does not belong to that periphery. So she's looking from a distance, as well as the director. And here in this film as well, the director is looking from a distance. So is that something that, because is content important to your taxonomy of realism? That is the main question in terms of, is subject matter, where does it enter into realist modes?
Yeah, as I said during my talk, I'm talking about conventional narrative films that have a plot, and the plot is fiction. And my interest is precisely in that combination of indexical realism and the fiction, how these things walk together throughout. Like in the scene of the painting, there is endless numbers of cuts. So the scene that takes 10 minutes was shot during many days in which that picture was being done. And we can see that the characters are wearing different clothes, the position of the screen is different, and all that kind of thing. So, but there are some elements that mean that these guarantees the seal of authenticity to the cause that these films are defending. And that's what I think matters in terms of the politics. They are attaching the link to reality. All the time they are worried about showing real favelas, whether it's, and you're making the point that the favela shots were in the Transmissão, in the north, but the south is also full of them, and the music is about the southern zone. When the Happy, do Pequeno Príncipe, Mano Brown is singing about Belo Horizonte, São Paulo, and Rio, and the favelas are in Recife or around Recife, this also suggests a unity, how that thing about the national identity through the question of poverty and misery that surrounds those rich areas, and how aesthetically they are connected, is what I think is the most amazing achievement of these filmmakers. I also mentioned here that they not just nationalize the question, singular questions of particular places, they are expanded onto a national question. They connect the several parts of Brazil. They contextualize, which is another realist procedure, contextualizing, showing where these things are coming from. But they also internationalize. That's something that Chico Science, Mangue Beach was doing all the time, borrowing from pop music from all over the world. And so I think this is, again, a conversation, another passage, uniting people around one cause, which is a social cause. They are trying to address social causes there. And although we may not agree with what the words in the lyrics are saying, because the final solution is Jesus, and Brazil is going through that in many respects with all these leaders, evangelical leaders who keep preaching that all the time. The images are showing something different. They are not showing that the solution is Jesus. They are interviewing characters in the film who are pointing out to two possible solutions. One of them is you become doing justice with your own hands, killing people. And another solution, which is educational, and Garnizer, who is a rapper and a drummer himself, devoted to educational projects and charitable projects. So I think what matters in all these cases are precisely those dialogues between fiction, between manipulation and non-manipulation, between the index and the story. I don't know if I answered your questions. I'm not at all saying that we should believe in the reality of everything we've seen, no.
Oi. Okay. Thanks again, Lucy, for, again, another brilliant talk, and which opens up to many, many, many questions and many ways of rethinking things. I might be doing perhaps a long commentary. I'd like to be brief, but one of the things I'd like to do, or your talk made me think, is a revision again of Bazinian defense of the plano sequência, of the short sequence, or plan séquence, something that we actually discussed or did in also a timely seminar in Leeds, remember?
Yes.
Which you organized.
Uh-huh.
But I was wondering if we could perhaps be more productive to join in your taxonomy the both ends of the division, which means production, which you really put up and centralized, with reception, both of them. I think it becomes more productive to understand things, or to make us revise even classical definitions of fiction and documentary. And I'm thinking about this because I remember in another meeting in England with Babenco, that I think that was in Leeds also, I don't remember.
Yes, yeah.
We had the chance to be with him for 3 or 4 days. And I talked to him about something that always struck me as a very nice example to be brought to this kind of talk we heard here, which is Pichotti. Not only as a character, because we could say that's a biopic based on something that comes from physical reality, but a special sequence. Actually, it's not a sequence, it's just a brief moment treated as a plan séquence, as a short sequence, where, I don't know if people will remember this, where Pichotti is trying to write, and he's really actually writing, probably for the first time, or copying something from a blackboard, which, when you have a professor, and I think she writes something like, "A terra é redonda como uma laranja." Something, do you remember this, anybody? I think it's something like that. And I remember, I asked Babenco at that time in England, if he rehearsed that, how many times he did to get that. For me, it's for me, it's the best moment of the whole film. It's less than 1 minute, maybe even it's some seconds. And he said he did only once. Because I was wondering why he placed the camera at the bottom, like on a contre-plongé kind of position, so that he could get, we wouldn't see the hand of Pichotti, we would see his face while he was writing "A terra é redonda como uma laranja," something like that. And it's really amazing because the division between fiction and documentary is completely gone. And that's one of the moments when the physical reality comes to the front. And you really forget that you are watching a film. So that comes to the first moments of your talk. And I'd like you to comment on this. But the question is that, like when we combine production, and I'm talking here about film language and mise-en-scène, and then reception, we are also mixing, in those moments that I saw, mixing these classic conceptions of documentary and fiction. And then we can talk, for example, within the fiction, like what I'm talking with Pichotti, which is also confusing because it's a biopic based on someone that comes from reality. But I was thinking just about a fiction when we listen, for example, Godard talking about Ana Karina's faces in Vivre sa vie, for example, when he also says that it's a fiction film, but it's also a documentary about Karina's faces. Mm. And when we think about, for example, another example of film history, John Cassavetes and his relationship with his actors and actresses within specific moments of his brilliant filmography, as well. So, so this is what was intriguing me. If your presentation here can help us revise again, bring back again the revision, a revisionist thought about the classical division between documentary and fiction. But when I'm talking about this, I'm joining those two modes that you divided here, the mode of production with the mode of reception, which I think can help us to bring back again, and then include Bazin, and think about Bazin in his defense of the plano sequência. The second thing is just a commentary that your presentation made me think about is, I think it would be very interesting to devise a film course, a one-semester course, on that moment when the periferias come into Brazilian cinema, that moment, and the role of music again in that appropriation. And when I saw Amarelo Manga again here, and then also Rápido Pequeno Príncipe just now, it reminded me, made me think that we are with the leftovers of the video clip language being inscribed within Brazilian cinema. Again, like in Amarelo Manga, for me, that's obvious. And also, o Invasor, when you have, then it's the opposite of the plan séquence that we have in Rápido Pequeno Príncipe, because it's all edited, especially Amarelo Manga. And Amarelo Manga, for me, really, looking today, looked like a video clip of that, the 80s video clip. And I think that the favela, it's an assumption, that the favela, the periferia, gets strength in Brazilian cinema at that moment. And it would be interesting to see a collection of those films and relate, this is a project, and relate that to the music, to the role of music at that moment. Sorry for
Thank
being
you,
so...
Jean-Louis. Yeah, let's bring you to Reading to give that course to us about the films on the periphery. I think it would be great, really. Going back to your point about modes of reception and modes of production, they are never conceived separately, and those things, any taxonomy is schematic and reductive, but it can help us understand, because there is so much confusion, and I think all that debate created between the psychoanalytic approach to film studies that was so criticized by Bordwell, Noel Carroll, and so on, and then by the phenomenological criticism that emerged in the wake of Deleuze, on the basis that the spectator was infantilized, was thought to be back into the mirror stage, the Lacanian mirror stage, and so on, and that no spectator was like that, of course, because the spectator have their subjectivities, intelligence, rationale, and all that. That's because there is that crucial misunderstanding that the Laura Mulvey and everybody else who were talking about subject position within the cinema, they are talking about modes of address. They were not talking about modes of reception. They were not preoccupied with individual spectators. They were talking about how the film was trying to position the spectator. And they were not saying the spectator will come and sit in that particular position, and that everybody is going to see the film in the same manner. So that was a huge misunderstanding of criticism. And Laura Mulvey is as valid today as it was when she wrote her beautiful Visual Pleasures article. And we cannot stop quoting her, because she was absolutely right. She found something, she discovered something that we cannot live without to this date. And this is how the camera position in front of the spectators also implies a position, a spectatorial position. But that's nothing to do with real life spectators. It's just the mode of address. She was not, however, talking so much about modes of production. Who talked about it is Bazin. because Bazin was worried about realism, and I am worried about realism too. Bazin talked about the long take and the long shot as a means of preserving space-time continuity within the shot, and created the concept of ontology on the basis of that, etc. We know all that. So he was worried about how the film was made. I am also worried about how the film was made. I'm not against any of the other modes. I'm not saying now everybody stop thinking about reception, blah, blah, and think about, no. What I'm saying is, I'm talking about realism, and in order to talk about realism, I need to look at modes of production. So if other people are not talking about realism, there is no reason why they should not look at the other modes. And indeed, phenomenology and haptic spectatorship is absolutely fascinating as a field of study. And then you have to write, like Vivian Sobchak has written, about how a film inflects her. And she writes her, as is many of them, in the first person, saying, I felt this and that when I watched the piano. And this is valid, but she's not saying every single person who watches this film is going to feel the same way towards the piano. And it would be stupid to say so, because it's not, each spectator will react in a different manner. There are determinants of class, of gender, of culture, that changes the way completely that you watch a film. So this is to clarify what I hope will be the uses of this taxonomy, is to see exactly where you were coming from when you address a film and what you were talking about. Have I answered all your queries?
Hello, my name is Marcelo, and I would like to propose a few questions. I'm going to explain my point. Your main interest was on the mode of production as a basis for realism in the films you chose to analyze here. But at the same time, you mentioned the static procedures they used to form the sequences you showed. So travelings, jump cuts, and aerial shots, etc. So I'd like you to further comment on those static procedures, and specifically if you see some relationship between them and the way in which those films are creating passages, as you use that concept in your talk. And being a little more specific, I think, as I understand it, you saw music in those sequences as a way of expanding the spatial and the thematic reach of those sequences. So I would like to move on with another question that would be something like, does music can be a part or one of the elements of the construction of what one may call creative geographies, to recall that concept of Lev Kuleshov. The idea is, in that concept, to create an idea of a continuous space and time through shots from different spaces and times. So it's a fictional procedure, but maybe we can displace it to think about a realistic use of creative geography. I would like you to comment on that as well. And
can I answer those two first, and then you put
yes,
some more?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. So going back to the first one about the technical procedures to make those shots. I think it's crucial the way you approach, because my question about realism does not involve solely the cast, but also the crew. If you remember the first clip I showed of Delicate Crime, you may have noticed that it was very dark. Obviously, the quality was very bad here, but the original is already dark. The fact that it's dark is because they had to turn down the lights to create an atmosphere for the actors conducive to their creation. The actress was, for the very first time in her life, removing her prosthetic leg in front of anybody. And this she did not in front of one person, but in front of whoever watches this film. It was a life-changing event for her, and if you watch the extras of the film, you will see the impact that this thing has had in her life. So that's the beginning of that scene. And the low light, the very few crew members that were there in order not to interrupt, and that lasted for quite a long time, many, many days until the works were done, were essential for the creation of this scene the way we see this now. Obviously, then there is editing, there is a number of other tricks. There is no music, as you can see. To move on to your to complete this, the way that this scene was created reminds me very much of the realm of the senses, in which it was a decision of cast and crew to change their own behaviors, to break up with monogamous marriage. The actor who played the film had a family, his wife, and they agreed that during the film he would be having somebody else, probably liking her very, very much. And that was necessary for the film to become what was intended. And Oshima describes the environment in which they shot many of the sex scenes as religious. It was like a ritual, very low light. The crew, he said, some of us were on our knees, almost like praying, while that miracle was happening. And the same happens here. The other thing is, moving on to your second question, it doesn't need to be music. The intermediality I'm addressing here is one that connects the word to real life, to reality, and is transformative of that reality. The first example was to do with painting. I could also show some of them relating to theater. The other ones were to do with a particular period, as Jean-Louis very rightly pointed out, of Brazilian cinema, where the new Brazilian cinema became aware of the favelas again, you know, going back to that period that Arturo Tran also reminds us started in 1955 with Nelson Pereira dos Santos, Rio 40 Graus. I don't know if we have time for more questions. They are telling me no more time. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, but we are a little late, and we have another session, and we will have 15 minutes between, and so sorry. Thank you very much.